Hello, welcome to Jewish Museum Milwaukee's Museum Moments. This is our week exploring small town Jewish experiences and kind of a different sense of why people are coming to Wisconsin, what's bringing them here. I'm excited today to be joined by a new member of the Nathan and Esther Peltz Holocaust Education Resource Center's Survivors Speakers Bureau, Susan Schneiderman, who is joining me to share her family's experience about moving to Whitehall, Wisconsin, which is not a place that I was familiar with before talking to Susan. So I'm really intrigued by learning the experience, by hearing about the experience of her family coming to Wisconsin in the aftermath of the Holocaust and establishing a life and a business for themselves there. Susan, welcome to Museum Moments.
Hi.
So as we're starting out here, can you give us kind of how do your parents come to the United States? What's bringing them here? And then what brings them to Wisconsin?
My parents were both Holocaust survivors, and after the war, they were 22 years old. They got married. They lived in Germany, actually, because that was the gathering place for everyone who wanted to go to Israel. But my parents wound up coming to the United States in 1950. My dad's family, before the war, was in the cattle and meat business. That is what my father knew. So he didn't speak English in 1950 when they got here, but he got a book and they made a little sign that said, "I am a butcher and I need a job." And he got a job right away, flicking chickens at a butcher shop. Well, that didn't last for very long because that was just not what he wanted to do. And he started getting into the cattle and meat business in New York. But working for someone was just not my dad's ideal. He was a real go-getter. And he heard about a packing plant for sale in, it was either St. Paul or Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And he had been working with a family that was very big in the meat business in New York, the Mailman family. They had 3 sons. 2 worked with the father, Louis, in the business. And the younger son, Danny, had just graduated from college. He was kind of the wild child. And Louis said, "I will go into partnership with you if you take my younger son and teach him the business." So the 3 of them went and looked at this plant. They came out to Wisconsin in 1956 to look at this plant and found out there was a better property for sale in Whitehall, Wisconsin, which they purchased. So in 1958, I was 7 years old. I had just finished first grade. We packed up and moved to Whitehall, Wisconsin.
Was the existing Whitehall, Wisconsin food packing plant a kosher plant before, or did
it was a closed plant? It wasn't operational at that time. So they moved there, and my father knew the kosher meat business, and there was a demand, and they were in western Wisconsin where there was a lot of supply. And he was basically the cattle buyer, and they really built this plant. They sold meat and meat products internationally, and they were one of the largest suppliers for the kosher products for Hebrew National, for Sinai out east. They would have the rabbis, the shoychads, would come from Chicago. They take the train to Crosse, which was 48 miles away, and they would come for the week. Somebody would pick them up, drive them. They would stay at the local hotel. They brought their own food, and then Friday afternoons, there was always a rush to get them back to the train, back to Chicago before Shabbos. So they really, my dad was very, very progressive in building this plant and what they did and who they supplied. It was pretty amazing considering in 1958 and 1960, he hadn't even been in this country 10 years, and he was in his early 30s.
How did the community of Whitehall kind of respond to this, new operation in town that had, and I am assuming you guys were the first Jewish family in town as well?
Well, Whitehall at that time was population 1,400, and it was a small Norwegian Lutheran town. And I have to say, the people were very gracious and welcoming. They just had no knowledge because they had never met anyone Jewish before. Did we have the normal, someone came up to my dad not knowing who he was and said, did you see the Jews? They have horns. And my dad just shook his head. But he kind of educated them. He had a good sense of humor, and he had fun doing this, educating them. He did things like Whitehall they had a lot of parades, which was always fun. Well, my dad knew that a meatpacking plant in St. Paul sponsored a drum and bugle corps. So he told them one year, I'm getting you a band for your parade, and everyone was thrilled. However, until the band showed up, which was right when the parade started, no one knew that it was the Black Drum and Bugle Corps. So not only had they never seen Jews before, here he introduced Blacks into the community. Or he did something like, we had USDA meat inspectors because they sold cross state lines. And he had heard of a wonderful man who was an inspector, very good reputation. He was a lovely man, and my dad requested him, and he came. He was a Black meat inspector. I mean, but he did this. This was his way of educating these people, and no one hid in this town. I mean, they would take him out to supper clubs. Everything was visible. And I have to say, the people were very warm, welcoming, and very gracious. It was just, they had never been exposed to anything.
Did they have a sense of his history as a survivor of the Holocaust? I mean, that he spoke with a foreign accent, I'm sure. He had,
I really don't know at that time. I don't know what they knew, although, his English wasn't that good, although he did pretty good. I mean, he was also very progressive in that whole area. I mean, he employed people from Winona, from all the surrounding areas. And he also promoted the young farmers, the kids that were raising cattle to sell at the county fairs. He was very big at promoting them so that they would grow up to be farmers, and so that there would always be a supply chain. And he did a lot for that area. Whitehall had another industry besides the packing plant. They had a Land O'Lakes plant. So my dad decided that there was going to be beef and dairy days. He would supply the beef, Land O'Lakes would supply the dairy, and the bakery would supply the bread. They built a spit near the town gazebo, which is still there, I think. I understand that Beef and Dairy Days is a very active festival still going on now. And he would buy one of the champions from the county fairs, and they would barbecue it, and free food for everyone. I mean, it was a way of, it was great.
It's amazing that the kosher butcher operator of the town is like, you know what? In the spirit of community, I'm gonna put meat and dairy together anyway.
Exactly. Considering we had a kosher observant home.
You guys, the family, you stayed in Whitehall for a period, and then you moved to La Crosse.
Right. We lived in Whitehall for 4 years, from 1958 to 1962, and then we moved to La Crosse, which was 48 miles away. But while we were in Whitehall, we went to the synagogue every week to La Crosse. My older brother David was bar mitzvahed while we were in Whitehall, and of course the bar mitzvah was at La Crosse at the synagogue. My parents had the party, a very formal big party at the local country club, and everyone said it was the best birthday party they'd ever been to. But we didn't hide our traditions. Yiddish was the first language in our home, and it didn't matter who was around. The only way we kind of realized that my parents were speaking to us in Yiddish was by the looks on our friends' faces. The schools were very, I remember the first year we were there, they called my parents and they said, there's going to be the annual Christmas pageant if my brother David and I could attend. And my mother's response was, yes, no crossing, no kneeling. that was, which obviously wasn't going to happen in a school. When there were Jewish holidays, we didn't go to school, and there was never an issue. We also didn't go to school the last days, the observant days of a holiday as well, because my parents were observant. So, the schools never gave us any issue, any problems with that. They were good with all of that.
It's amazing because I think that people often think that, oh, these are so insular, it's going to be so hard. And that I also grew up as the only part of an only Jewish family in a small town. So I also found that experience that they were very understanding of practice and observance and wanting to know more.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. But they were, I don't think, looking back, I mean, it was great. It was fun. And we were able to do things. We were always invited. I was always invited to trim someone's Christmas tree or to go to church with someone. It was a big deal. And you know what? When you took the religion out of it, but you went for the traditions, it was fine. And it made us very adaptable. And it also taught us other cultures. I mean, I think my brother David and I really knew a lot about Norwegian culture as children. My younger brother Eli was born in Whitehall. He was born with Down syndrome. So this was also another education for people, because at that point, you usually put children in an institution, but my parents obviously did not do that. So Santa Claus always came to our house because people would send him for my younger brother. And it was, it wasn't a religious, it was nice.
thank you so much, Susan, for joining us today for this museum moment. It is so interesting to learn about Whitehall and that community and that experience. And it's really a heartening story in this moment and in this particular season. So thank you. Thanks also to our sponsor, Robin Cohen, for supporting Museum Moments. We appreciate all of the support that many of you have done as we're closing out our end of the year social justice campaign. If you'd like to contribute, please go to jewishmuseummilwaukee.org and you can find the donate button there. Thank you, Susan. This was wonderful.
Thank you for doing this.